It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Fiona Armstrong, who is the Lord Lieutenant of Dumfries, in which capacity she's the Queen's representative in that part of the lowlands of Scotland. She's been very active in her own clan society, the Armstrong Society, for many, many years. She's the former reporter and program anchor for ITV, the BBC, and Borders TV in Scotland. She's also, with her other hat on, Lady MacGregor of MacGregor, married to my chief, Sir Malcolm, who we saw yesterday on the program. And she's also a regular contributor, columnist for the Scottish Banner magazine. So many of you know her byline from there. And Fiona has interviewed the Duke of Buccleuch, Chief of the Scots, who not only is the largest landowner in Scotland and a Knight of the Thistle, but very involved in his clan society and in the history of his clan and Scotland. So Fiona, I'm going to pass it over to you, and you're going to tell us about the film and take it from there.
John, thank you very, very much indeed. And greetings from Scotland, where it is very wet and very dark, because we're slightly ahead of you in the day. I'm not selling the country very well, am I, saying it's very wet and very dark. But actually, one person who did sell it incredibly well, who reinvented it and put it on the worldwide stage was, of course, as you say, Walter Scott. And Walter Scott's home, Abbotsford, is about 40 miles away from where I'm sitting here. Now, I work for ITV Border, which is a local TV station. We straddle the north of England and the south of Scotland, so that's where we're the border, ITV Border. And we are never away from Abbotsford because it's such a romantic place. It's such a visual place. It's great to capture on camera. And we've been there many, many times and made films on it. In this, the 250th anniversary of Scott's birth, we decided, as you said, John, to talk to a noted clansman. And you don't get more noted in this part of the world or in Scotland than the Duke of Buccleuch. He is chief of the Scots, as you say, and he absolutely adores Walter Scott. We went to his home at Bow Hill to meet him there, capture him on camera. Let's hear what he had to say.
Welcome to Border Live. In this week's programme, the man behind the stories. It's 250 years since the birth of the novelist Sir Walter Scott, and we've heard much about his achievements. But what was the Border's author really like?
You'd be a bit starstruck if Walter Scott suddenly turned up today, wouldn't you?
Silenced, I think, really. I would either do that or I'd want to embrace him. You know what I mean? I just feel, well, he's a hero for me.
The Duke of Buccleuch is one of the borderland's most influential figures, and one whose family claims strong links to the writer. Here at Bow Hill House, he shows me the place dedicated to his kinsman's memory.
Come on in and have a look at our Scott room, which is a sort of shrine to the man.
Are you actually related to Walter Scott? Is he an ancestor?
It's slightly embarrassing to admit that we're not directly related, but we are kinsmen of Sir Walter. He's actually descended himself from the Scots of Harden, that branch of the Scots. So in a sense, we all go back to the same fountain source. But we were kinsmen, but very close friends. So he regarded my ancestors, 3rd, 4th and 5th Dukes of Buccleuch, as his clan chiefs. And particularly the 4th Duke, he was a really intimate friend because they were building at the same time. Bow Hill was enlarged at the same time as Abbotsford. And when, sadly, Charles the 4th Duke died, Scott became guardian of Walter Francis the 5th Duke. So close, but not blood relations in that way.
That's a sadness, is it?
It is a sadness because, you know, I feel for for me, I would love to have a little bit of the direct genetic descent. To me, he's the greatest of all Scotsmen. He was the creator of the great historical novel. He was a sort of universal man, and he had this extraordinary capacity of remembering things. It's what really fed into all his poetry and his novels, and particularly when he travelled across the borders and had conversations, and he managed to remember the old oral traditions of the borders, the minstrelsy and the poetry, and noticed the way of life and minded about the way of life as well. You know, he was, in a sense, the inventor of what is now a very popular genre of historical fiction. I've got here in my hand the first edition, the first 3 volumes of his novel Waverley, that was lead to a huge number of others. I'm clutching them because they're very, very precious indeed. Inside one of them is written a little story about how they arrived here at Bow Hill. Sir Walter apparently turned up one day in 1814, and he handed them to my ancestor Charles, and his comment was that he'd bought them a few days earlier and thought they might interest the Duke, which was an understatement, to put it mildly.
These old and rare books led this Duke to offer opportunities to modern-day writers. The Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction is one of the world's most prestigious literary awards.
So the prize was to recognise writers who wrote as beautifully and as imaginatively as Walter Scott. And we started at a time when Abbotsford, his home, was struggling, and we felt that it would give greater recognition to his place as the creator of historical fiction. And secondly, we really wanted to recognise the quality of good historical fiction.
This year's winner is Dame Hilary Mantel, who also received the first award 12 years ago. But the man whose work gave birth to a literary prize did more than write.
Scott's been called the man who put the Scot in Scotland. He's also been described as Scotland's first tourist guide. Is that fairly accurate?
I think he is. I think he invented Scottish tourism, and it was because of his beautiful, passionate descriptions of the landscape and the habits of the people that visitors flocked from all over the country, and not just from this country, but from Europe as well, because they read about it and they were drawn to this sort of mysterious, magical land.
Walter Scott was admired by kings and queens. Victoria was a fan. George IV gave him a knighthood. Why then, in later years, did he fall out of favour?
I think it's partly because people struggled with the vernacular passages in it. You know,
He's quite hard to read.
It was
in a way,
hard work. You need to get into the swing of it, don't you? Really, it's one of the paradoxes of Walter Scott that he's read more in Japan and Russia than he is in this country, and that because when his novels are translated, they miss out the difficult bits. It's all in the same style. Whereas I think people coming for the first time to Scott take time to get your head round, you know, and the vocabulary is different and so on. So you have to persist, and I think we're not focused enough. Once you do concentrate, though, there is so much to enjoy within it, and I hope slowly that he will come back into wider circulation, because at the heart of all Scott's novels is a cracking good yarn, isn't it? You know, he was a great storyteller.
So 250 years after his birth, how
Yes.
can we put Walter Scott centre stage again?
Wouldn't it be wonderful if people out of easy habit picked up his novels and read them? They get so much pleasure. I personally think that as one of the greatest of Scottish writers, our education system, our school system, has a duty to try and introduce young people to him, so that they are not frightened and not unnerved by vocabulary and languages which they don't immediately understand. We're so determined, quite rightly, to preserve the Gaelic language. I think the Scots, which we speak down here, is just as important part of our cultural makeup. And I think through the school system, it would be wonderful to think that there was a great push was made, particularly in this 250th anniversary.
You were obviously fascinated by Scott. I'll go as far as saying you sound as if you're rather besotted with him. Is that the case?
Yes, I'm afraid it is. I really am. I really am. I just think he's such a wonderfully rich and rounded character, and a very human character. You know, Scott had real disaster in his life. In 1826, A, his wife died, and B, he went spectacularly bankrupt, or rather his publisher Constable did. And Scott was determined not to be defeated. And over the last 6 years of his life, he effectively wrote off his debts. Now, I think that's a wonderful inspiration for all of us, really, of not being defeated, of not turning to everyone else for help.
And dare I ask you, have you got a favourite novel, a favourite bit of poetry?
Well, I should choose the one which he wrote about my family, because his first great success, The Lay of the Last Minstrel, which is set in Newark Tower, just a couple of miles from where we're talking, was about the 16th century bold Buccleuch and the borders and the border life, which I find just as fascinating and exciting as they would have then. And it seems to me that there are passages in that which to some people are a bit corny, but which for me show that Scott understood Scotland and the borders, and I would like to take that away on my desert island to read over and again.
Richard Buccleuch, it is yours.
In part 2 of Border Life.
He romanticised tartan, he popularised tartan in an era when tartan had that sort of almost forbiddenness. And I think without him, tartan would not be what it is today.
We're at a Selkirk mill, finding out more about the multicoloured cloth Walter Scott promoted. That's in a moment.
That was part 1 of our programme, talking to the Duke of Buccleuch, who's obviously got this real passion for Walter Scott and his works. And, you know, he's right. I've tried to read Scott, and some novels are easier than others. Rob Roy, I found it reasonably easy to read, and I've talked to other people. The Duke was right. It is the vernacular, it's the words. And when they translate it into Russian or whatever, or Chinese or whatever, then they take out the difficult bits and they put it in more simpler language. But if you can get beyond that with a Scott novel, really, they are so wonderful to read, so eye-opening and eye-catching, and really worth giving a go to. So the Duke did not just talk about Walter Scott and his works, he also spoke to us about tartan, and here he is again.
Welcome back to Border Life. Walter Scott wasn't just a writer, he was a setter of fashion, helping to promote a textile that would dazzle the world.
That's not a costume, it's a wool tartan, the last word in fashions for Americans. Hers is a travelling suit of authentic Cameron tartan. But you haven't seen anything yet. Wait till they change their outfits. Yes, she's still faithful to tartan, but where's his? Oh, there it is. Wool slacks of rust, brown and white tartan. Yes, America has definitely gone all Scotch.
Burn suppers, weddings, Highland games, with some taking it more seriously than others. Where would we be without a touch of tartan? Here at the Loch Carron Mill in Selkirk, they'd been making the stuff for 130 years.
It's one of the main things that Scotland's known for. You know, we have our golf, we have our whisky, we have our great climate and our lovely countryside, but tartan is all part of that.
Today there are thousands of tartans, for charities and for football clubs. Even a famous train might have a tartan, while a giant green cartoon character also lays claim to one. When it comes to fashion, this iconic cloth seems to have it all wrapped up. I'm well versed in tartan. Then, married to a Scottish clan chief, you have to be. So naturally, this is one of the first patterns I look for.
So you'll recognise this one. That's your MacGregor tartan.
I know that one. Yes, I do know that
You'll recognise that. And in its modern coloration, here we have the modern MacGregor. I think for customers, they love that history, that story. They like to have something that has that backstory, so it gives it the authenticity. It's such a great surprise to see where it sells and how far across the globe it can travel. It has a popularity that transcends fashion trends. It's popular to show your identity as a Scot, whether you're at home or abroad. It really is a must-have with a lot of design brands. So we're selling to design houses in America, in Japan, in Korea, in China, and in Europe as well. And our UK customer base is growing every year.
Yes, have tartan will travel. And this textile certainly does that. It's a market that brings hundreds of millions of pounds each year to the Scottish economy. A fascination that just seems to endure.
You know, I know going back to the 80s when we were working with the likes of Vivienne Westwood, and she popularised tartan through very avant-garde clothing, and it was popularised through the punk movement, which, you know, if there's an antithesis of something classical, it would be punk, but they adopted it as part of their uniform almost. Because there's such a depth of colour, there's such a variety of patterns, it always finds favour with somebody. It's a great way of promoting Scotland.
Well, I've spotted another pattern that finds favour with me.
Of course, this is one of the loveliest tartans. It is the Armstrong pattern. And above it, one that's even more popular. This is the Scott tartan.
Now, I don't know too much about this clan cloth, but I know a man who does.
Of course, tartans had existed in the Highlands for centuries beforehand, but I think he made it the thing to wear. And through the 19th century, you then find more and more people habitually wearing it. And of course, it's now become something that we take for granted. And of course, since his time, since the 1820s, there's been a huge flowering in the number of tartans being woven. All sorts of different new weaves are now being made available for special occasions. And I think it's brightened our lives quite enormously.
Bow Hill, the Duke of Buccleuch, the chief of the Scots, is wearing his clan tartan. Or rather, he's wearing one of them.
So what have we got here, Richard?
Well, we have a selection of tartans, all of which are called Scott. And I'm told by those in the business that this one, which is really relatively simple and straightforward and much more akin in a sense to the old border shepherd's plaid, is probably the most popular one over here. Though if I leaf through it, I will come across a wonderfully rich and bright red one, which was the one I discovered in North America. A great many of my kinsmen across the Atlantic wear that with great enthusiasm. But personally, I've always sort of rather liked sticking to the original border hues. I mean, it's probably why I myself am wearing a version of that, a Scott of Buccleuch, it's known as.
So your own tartan, how did that come about?
It was a regimental tartan for the King's Own Scottish Borderers, for their bagpipers. And I've always rather liked it because to me it has echoes in what Scott himself wore. Now, of course, this is a manufactured tartan. What he would have worn would have been wools, natural colours, with perhaps a little bit of vegetable dye in it. So you had something that sort of blended into the countryside. But I do like the simplicity of it and the echo of the past.
I wonder how we got from something like the simple shepherd's check to some of the gaudy tartans we see today. Take us through these again.
Yeah,
they say
absolutely.
This is the most popular
well,
one.
I'm told that for people who live here in Scotland, this one, which I like as well because it's so close to the original plaid type tartan, is very popular. But you get many and many brighter ones.
So the brighter the better,
The
really.
brighter the better.
I wonder what Walter Scott would make of all these different colours, different shades, the gaudy tartans today.
I think Walter Scott, for all that he was an incredibly versatile and clever man, he was also a showman. He was interested in how things looked. He loved decoration and detail. So for him, I think the versatility of tartans that we have now would have delighted him enormously.
I wonder what the great man, Walter Scott, would have made of today's Highland Games, particularly somewhere like America, where it's just a sea of tartan.
It's a different world, and particularly if you go to some of the very large ones, like the Grandfather Mountain Games, where I think you have up to 50,000 people bedecked from top to toe in tartan, and with several changes of tartan during the course of the few days that we're all staying together in Grandfather Mountain, you realise what an identifier it is for Americans of Scottish descent, and sometimes Americans not of Scottish descent. But I think my favourite example of it was when we went to Florida, and in fact they had one day of their Highland Games within Disneyland, and my wife and I found ourselves being driven round in a golf buggy by Goofy dressed in tartan. I think that's quite hard to beat.
Was it Buccleuch tartan? Was it Scott tartan?
I wish it had been, but I think I think Walt Disney had his own tartan as well.
Just clear one thing up. It is all right for a borderer to wear a tartan, is it?
Well, it's a very good question because, when I was young, we all wore kilts as children, but when we got to the age of about 12, 13, 14, suddenly there were no kilts. And I think that an earlier generation, certainly my grandparents' generation, thought it just was something you wore as a child and not as a grown-up. Nowadays, of course, that seems odd and curious, really. But I think we borderers feel just as happy, kilts or trews as I'm wearing now, but certainly happy wearing tartan as we should be.
Well, I have to say, if you're wearing trews, it's a lot easier to jump on your horse, isn't it, and go off and do a spot of reeving.
True. Absolutely, you're quite right. I think as one gets older, they also conceal the knobbly knees rather better. Reeving days are over.
Good old tartan. I mean, most countries would give their eye teeth.
Yeah.
To have a marketing tool like this.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, I do so agree with you. And I know some people think we become obsessed by it, and of course we have to keep in it in proportion with everything else Scottish. But we're so fortunate because through tartan, an industry was created here in the Scottish borders, a wonderful weaving industry. And I hope it isn't a dream, but I think that industry has a future. And if we can actually encourage it, be proud of it, wear it as much as we can, and ensure that it catches the eye of the world's fashion designers, then that's wonderful for the borders. It's jobs, it's employment, and what could be better for us?
Quite. And that's it from Border Life for this week. We'll see you next time.
Well, that was the Duke of Buccleuch speaking to us from his home at Bowhill in the Scottish borders. You know, Richard Buccleuch, he is a wonderful man. He has time for everybody and he speaks a lot of sense about Scotland. You know, and he's really keen to see jobs coming to all parts of Scotland. He's really keen to open up his estate so that people can experience the great outdoors and get a taste of the countryside, etc. He's a great guy.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Very, very interesting film, and your skill as an interviewer jumps out as well.